Have you ever stopped to wonder what's actually going on inside your head when you're, say, writing an essay with AI helping out? Or maybe when you're tackling a tough problem in a team and there's a chatbot in the mix? Well, today we're doing a deep dive into two really fascinating new studies that are starting to give us some answers.
Yeah, they really pull back the curtain a bit on that.
Our mission today is to unpack these two pieces of research. One's from MIT, looking at individual essay writing, with and without AI, using a pretty advanced brain imaging and language analysis.
Right.
And the other is from Sejong University, investigating how teams solve physics problems collaboratively, again, with different kinds of AI help.
Two very different scenarios, but both incredibly relevant right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is compare these two studies. They're distinct, sure, but they both touch on how AI affects, well, how our brains engage, how we remember things, even how we collaborate and learn. We'll pull out the key nuggets and, connect the dots to see what the educational implications might be for you. Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, this is really timely stuff. I mean, AI isn't just coming, it's here. It's woven into education already. And these studies give us some of the first solid empirical evidence about the impact, both cognitively and behaviorally, in these different learning contexts.
Totally agree. Okay, so let's start with the MIT study, the one focused on individual writing.
Yeah.
How did they actually set that up? What was the experiment like?
Well, they were pretty meticulous about it. They had 54 participants, aged 18 to 39, all students from big universities around Boston, and they had them write essays, kind of like SAT prompts, over 4 sessions. The real key was how they divided them up for the first few sessions. One group used a large language model, like ChatGPT.
Okay.
Another group just used a standard web search engine. And the third group, they called them the brain-only group, had 0 external tools, just them and the prompt.
Right, a control group, essentially,
Yeah.
to isolate the effects. But how did they measure what was happening, especially, in the brain?
Ugh, this is where it gets really interesting. They used a multimodal approach. So first, EEG electroencephalography to record brain activity. That let them track things like cognitive engagement, mental load, specific neural patterns. We're talking about brain waves like alpha, beta, theta, delta. Each tells you something different about the brain's state.
Wow, okay, so real-time brain data.
Exactly. But they didn't stop there. They also use natural language processing, NLP, to analyze the essays themselves, looking at named entities, common phrases, and importantly, how similar or different the essays were, the homogeneity.
Okay.
Then they did interviews afterwards, asking about perceived ownership, like, did you feel you wrote this? Satisfaction, and this really telling thing. Could participants quote accurately from the essay they just wrote?
Interesting. Memory check.
Precisely. And finally, actual human teachers and a specially built AI judge scored the essays for quality.
Right, so brain scans, essay analysis, interviews, scores, a lot of data points. So the big question, what did the brain activity show? Did it change much between the groups?
It really did. And the most robust finding was the systematic scaling down of brain connectivity. It directly correlated with how much external help they had, the brain-only group. They showed the strongest, most widespread neural networks firing. Lots of internal cognitive work going on.
Okay, makes sense. They were doing it all themselves.
Right. The search engine group was kind of in the middle, showing intermediate engagement. And the LLM group, the ones using the AI, they consistently showed the weakest overall neural coupling.
Weakest coupling.
Yeah.
So less brain activity overall.
Yeah.
Or just less connected activity.
Less widespread coordinated activity. It really suggests that the more you rely on the AI to do things like generate ideas or structure the text, the less your own brain networks are, well, actively working together on those tasks.
Got it. So that brain-only group was really getting a cognitive workout.
Yeah.
You mentioned those different brainwave bands, alpha, beta, theta, delta. What did those tell them?
Well, in the brain-only group, they saw higher connectivity across pretty much all those key bands. Think of alpha being linked to things like semantic processing, creative ideas. Beta is more about active thinking, focus. Theta relates to working memory, juggling information, executive control. And delta is involved in large-scale integration, sustained attention.
Yeah.
So high connectivity there means the brain is deeply engaged in generating ideas, linking concepts, holding information in mind, a full workout, like you said.
The LLM group.
A stark contrast. Consistently lower connectivity across all those bands. It strongly suggests a significant cognitive offloading. Tasks like Brainstorming, organizing thoughts, even finding the right words, they seem to be handing those over to the AI.
That paints a pretty clear picture, AI reducing that internal effort. But you mentioned a fourth session where they switch things up. That sounds fascinating.
Yes, session 4 as a really important layer. Participants who had been in the brain-only group and then switched to using an LLM, the brain-to-LLM folks, they actually showed a network-wide spike in connectivity across all bands.
A spike. So using AI after thinking for yourself was more engaging.
It suggests that, yeah, when you've already done the hard work, grappled with the topic yourself, and then
Yeah.
you bring in AI, perhaps to refine or revise, your brain seems to engage more broadly. It's like you're integrating the AI's input into your own already established mental framework.
That is fascinating. Okay, but what about the flip side? People who started with AI and then had to go it alone. The LLM to brain group.
Right, that's where you see the potential downside. Those participants showed weaker neural connectivity overall, particularly an underengagement of their alpha and beta networks, those key networks for idea generation and active processing. And interestingly, they also tended to reuse specific words and phrases that were characteristic of the LLM they'd used before.
Huh. Like the AI style stuck with them.
Sort of. The researchers pointed to this as evidence of potential cognitive offloading or even skill atrophy. It's like if you rely on the AI crutch, your own cognitive muscles for certain tasks might weaken or just not develop as strongly.
Wow. Skill atrophy. That's a strong term. Okay, so beyond the brainwaves, what about the more tangible stuff? Did people feel differently about their essays? Could they remember what they wrote?
Oh, absolutely. The behavioral findings were just as revealing.
Yeah.
Ownership, for instance. The LLM group felt significantly less ownership over their essays. In the first session, I think only half felt full ownership and a few felt basically none. Compare that to the brain-only group, almost all of them felt full ownership.
Makes sense. If the AI did a lot of the writing.
It doesn't feel like yours.
Right.
But the quoting ability finding, that was really stark.
Tell me about that.
The LLM users performed terribly. In session 1, literally 0 out of 18 participants could provide an accurate quote from the essay they had just finished writing. 0.
0. Seriously.
0. And most of them, 83%, explicitly said they found it difficult. And this wasn't just a first session hiccup.
Yeah.
Even by session 3, about a third of them still couldn't quote accurately.
Yeah. And the other groups?
The brain-only and search engine groups, they were quoting almost perfectly by the second session.
So that directly links back to the brain activity, right? The reduced data and alpha in the LLM group.
Exactly. It suggests they bypass that deeper memory encoding process. If your brain isn't actively working to structure and store the information, you simply can't recall it accurately later. It wasn't really learned.
That has huge implications for education, obviously. Okay, what about the essays themselves? Did they actually read differently?
They did. The NLP analysis showed the brain-only essays were really varied, unique. Like individual fingerprints, as the researchers put it. The LLM group's essays, though, statistically very similar to each other within the same topic, homogeneous.
And how did the human graders react to that?
This is key. The human teachers described the LLM essays as, quote, soulless. They could often spot the AI style. And they consistently valued the individuality and maybe the creative struggle evident in the brain-only essays over the sort of objective perfection the AI produced.
Soulless. Ouch. But the AI judge liked them better.
Ironically, yes. The AI judge tended to score the AI-generated essays higher, which tells you something about what we value versus what an algorithm might optimize for.
A big disconnect there. What about participant satisfaction? Were people happier using AI?
Interestingly, no, not necessarily. The search engine users were actually the most consistently satisfied. For the LLM and brain-only groups, satisfaction was more varied. But there was this great quote from session 4 from someone who went from LLM to brain-only. They said something like, I think this essay without ChatGPT is written better. In terms of completion, ChatGPT is better, but in terms of detail, the essay from session 4 is better for me.
So even they recognized a deeper quality in their own unassisted work. Okay, summing up the MIT study then, what are the big educational takeaways?
Well, the main one is pretty clear. Outsourcing the core cognitive work to AI seems to bypass the very brain processes needed for deep understanding, strong memory encoding, and developing a sense of ownership. Over-reliance risks this cognitive offloading, potentially leading to skill atrophy and things like idea generation, critical analysis, and recall. You know, it's like trying to build muscle by watching someone else lift weights. It just doesn't work.
Right, your brain needs the workout.
Exactly. Actively exercising those neural pathways is fundamental for cognitive development.
Okay, that's a really strong message from the individual writing context. Now let's pivot. Completely different setup. Team problem solving in physics. Tell us about the Sejong University study. How did they approach this?
Right, so this study looked at undergrads working together on physics problems. They set up 4 different conditions for using ChatGPT. You had a control group, no AI at all. Then, experimental group 1, where each person had unrestricted AI access on their own smartphone.
Okay, so AI for everyone, anytime.
Yep. Then group 2 had unrestricted access too, but only through one shared team laptop, so they had to coordinate its use.
Interesting constraint.
And finally, group 3 also used a shared laptop, but with restricted access. They had to discuss the problem for 10 minutes first, and then they could only ask the AI a maximum of 7 questions or prompts.
Ah, so really structuring the interaction.
Uh-huh.
Okay, they were testing how those conditions of access mattered. What were they measuring?
A few key things. Performance, obviously, did the team solve the problems correctly? They also looked at the chatbot logs. How many queries did teams make? What was the quality of those queries? Were they just copying the question in or asking more complex, independent things?
Query quality, that sounds important.
Very. And crucially, they did detailed discourse analysis. They recorded the teams, analyzing their conversations, categorizing talk as conceptual about physics, metacognitive about their process, question query, interacting with AI, or just non-substantive chat.
Gotcha. A really rich picture of the team dynamics. So what about performance? Did AI just make everyone better?
Well, yes and no. This is where it gets a bit counterintuitive. Teamwork itself helped all groups did better as teams than individuals had done alone. And yes, all the groups using AI showed bigger performance gains than the control group.
Okay, so AI did help performance overall.
But here's the twist. The biggest performance improvements weren't in the group with unlimited individual access. They were in the groups with the structured limitations. Group 2, with the shared device, saw a 34% performance gain. Group 3, with restricted access, saw a 31% gain.
Wait, really? So having less access or structured access led to better results than just letting everyone use AI freely?
Exactly. That unrestricted individual access group, only a 17% gain, which was still better than the control group's 8%, but significantly less than the structured groups.
That's fascinating. The less is more idea with AI access. Why do you think that happened?
Well, the other data gives us clues. It strongly suggests that simply throwing AI at a problem isn't the magic bullet. How teams interact with it and with each other around it seems crucial. The constraints might have forced more productive collaboration.
Okay, let's dig into that. How did the way they use the chatbot change based on access?
Looking at the logs, Group 1, the unrestricted individuals, fired off the most queries by far, around 17 on average. The shared and restricted groups used it much less, only 6 or 7 times.
Makes sense. Sharing slows you down.
Right. But more telling was the quality. The unrestricted group mostly used simple, unmodified prompts or just asked for verification, kind of a surface-level interaction. Group 3, though, the restricted one, they used far more complex prompts and had the highest proportion of independent queries questions that integrated their own team discussion, not just repeating the problem.
Ah, so being forced to wait and limit their questions made them ask better, more thoughtful questions.
It certainly looks that way. The restrictions seem to promote deeper engagement with the query process itself, folding in their own reasoning.
Okay, that links to deeper thinking. What about how the teams talk to each other? Did AI change the conversation?
Massively. Overall, just having AI in the mix reduced the total amount of talking by about 45% compared to the control group. Less chatter overall.
Less talk. Is that good or bad?
Well, the type of talk shifted dramatically. The unrestricted individual group. They had the shortest sentences, the briefest exchanges. It implies they were interacting more with their own chatbots than deeply discussing things with teammates.
Right, heads down on their phones.
Pretty much. But the groups sharing the AI device, they had the longest utterances. They seemed to be having more elaborate discussions among themselves, likely about how to use the tool or interpreting its output.
So sharing forced more team interaction about the problem and the AI's role.
Exactly. And this shows up in the discourse focus. The unrestricted group's chat shifted heavily towards just asking the AI questions, question query, and brief acknowledgments, non-substantive. Actual conceptual discussion dropped way down. It suggests the AI was kind of replacing team-based knowledge construction.
Yikes, but the structured groups.
They maintained much higher levels of conceptual talk, discussing the physics, and crucially, they showed significantly more metacognitive engagement.
Metacognitive, thinking about their thinking.
Yeah, things like planning their approach, monitoring their understanding, recognizing the limits of the AI, deciding when and how best to use it. The structures seem to preserve the conceptual focus while actually boosting their metacognitive skills.
So structured AI access might actually help teams think more strategically about their own problem-solving process.
That's what the data suggests. It might mitigate the cognitive offloading risk by keeping them conceptually grounded while also enhancing those higher order thinking skills.
That's a really positive potential outcome. Did the collaboration itself change? Like, did roles emerge?
Yeah, that was another interesting finding. In the structured AI groups, often one person would sort of become the gatekeeper for the AI interaction, maybe the one most comfortable querying it. This led to a natural division of labor based on perceived expertise with the tool.
So new collaborative dynamics emerged. Okay, wrapping up the Sejong study, what are the key educational implications for teamwork?
The big one is that less is more seems to hold true for AI in collaborative settings. Structured limitations like sharing a device or having time query restrictions appear to foster deeper conceptual discussions, better metacognitive engagement, and ultimately improved problem-solving outcomes compared to unrestricted individual access. Unfettered AI use, conversely, might lead to more superficial engagement, less peer-to-peer learning, and potentially uneven participation.
Okay, so we've looked deep into individual writing and team problem solving. Let's connect the dots. What are the converging insights here? There seems to be this AI paradox emerging.
Absolutely. It's fascinating. Despite the totally different context, writing versus physics, individual versus team, and different methods, both studies point towards this paradox. AI can boost certain metrics, like efficiency or even scores, as we saw in Sejong, but it often comes at a hidden cognitive cost. It's definitely not a free lunch.
Right, this trade-off. Let's talk more about that cognitive cost, the offloading and superficiality. You see that in both.
Clearly. MIT showed the reduced brain connectivity, the poor memory, recall that shallow encoding, when individuals relied heavily on the LLM, and Sejong showed unrestricted AI led to those simpler queries, less conceptual talk, more surface-level engagement in teams. So, both studies flag this risk. We might be outsourcing the deep cognitive work, the mental effort that actually builds robust understanding and skills.
So it keeps coming back to the need for effortful processing. That seems key in both studies, too.
Definitely. Both strongly suggest that real learning, the kind that sticks and builds flexible skills, is intrinsically linked to active cognitive effort. Look at MIT's brain-only group higher load, yes, but stronger memory, more ownership. Look at Sejong's structured AI groups. They used the tool, but the constraints fostered more metacognition, more complex thinking around the tool. The struggle, the effort seems crucial.
And what about originality? That soulless comment from the MIT study is hard to forget. Does that have parallels in the team setting?
I think so. The MIT study was explicit about homogeneity AI essays sounding the same. While Sejong didn't measure soullessness, the shift towards simpler queries and less conceptual depth in the unrestricted AI teams points towards a potentially more formulaic, less creative problem-solving approach. If everyone just asks the AI the same basic questions, you risk getting very similar, perhaps less innovative answers. It raises big questions about fostering unique thought in any learning environment with AI.
It really does, which leads to maybe the biggest theme here. It's not if AI is used, but how.
Exactly. That seems to be the critical factor. Just having AI around isn't a guaranteed benefit, and as we've seen, it can even be detrimental if used without thought. The way it's integrated, the structure around its use, that's paramount. It's about strategic implementation, not just availability.
So structured access seems to be a promising thread connecting both.
I think it is. Sejong's less is more, finding with restricted shared access, resonates strongly with that nuance from MIT Session 4. Remember the brain to LLM group that showed that spike in brain activity?
Right, using AI after their own effort.
Yeah. It suggests that integrating AI strategically into a process where the learner has already done significant cognitive work can be highly engaging, possibly even beneficial. It's using AI to augment or refine, not to replace the initial thinking. That implies a deliberate, structured approach is better than just defaulting to AI from the start.
Augmenting, not replacing.
Yeah.
And that ties into the idea of developing skills versus just delegating them.
Precisely. MIT warned about skill atrophy if AI handles the high-level cognitive tasks. Sejong showed how unrestricted AI could lead to relying on the tool instead of building independent or collaborative problem-solving skills. If you constantly hand off the core mental work, the brainstorming, the deep analysis, the structuring, the remembering, those cognitive muscles just don't get built.
Okay, so let's bring this home. For you, the listener, navigating this complex landscape, what are the practical takeaways? How should you approach AI in your own learning?
Well, first, maybe try being a brain-first learner. especially when you're learning something new or complex. Try to engage your own thinking processes first. Wrestle with the material yourself before immediately turning to AI for the answer.
Resist the easy route, at least initially.
Right. And then when you do use AI, be really conscious about how. Think, am I just offloading this task or am I using the AI strategically? Am I using it to check my understanding, to explore alternative perspectives on my ideas, to help me refine my work? Make it a tool that serves your thinking, not replaces it.
Okay, be strategic.
Okay.
And don't shy away from the struggle.
Definitely embrace the effort. Recognize that cognitive friction, that feeling of working hard mentally, that's actually where the deepest learning and memory consolidation happens. It might feel uncomfortable, but that's often a sign your brain is really engaging and growing.
So the context matters too, right? When is AI okay versus when should you be more cautious?
Absolutely. Think about the goal. Need a quick draft fast, need some surface level brainstorming. AI might be fantastic for efficiency. But if the goal is to develop critical thinking, build long-term memory, foster creativity, or practice nuanced collaboration, that's when you need to be much more mindful and structured in how you integrate AI, if at all.
And one last point, you mentioned the echo chamber.
Yeah, be aware of that. As the MIT study noted, LLMs, like search engines, can sometimes give you a very neat, synthesized, singular answer, which might feel helpful, but it can also inadvertently narrow your perspective or reinforce existing biases. Always try to seek out multiple viewpoints. Question the single answer. True understanding often comes from grappling with complexity and different perspectives, not just accepting the first, cleanest summary the AI provides.
This has been incredibly insightful. What's really striking is how both studies, in their own ways, suggest that the sweet spot isn't maximum AI assistance. It's about thoughtful, structured integration. It seems our brains and our teams thrive most when the core challenge remains ours to engage with, even when powerful tools are available.
Well put. The challenge needs to stay with the learner, fundamentally.
So as AI becomes ever more present, maybe the crucial skill isn't just learning how to use AI effectively. Maybe it's mastering the art of knowing when and how to pause, to step back, and to make sure you are doing the thinking before letting the AI take over. It really makes you ask, what cognitive muscles are you actively exercising today, and which ones might you be letting atrophy without realizing it? Something important to consider for your next deep dive.